Hello, everybody. Today's review is going to be of the movie Oppenheimer, which I did go see in theaters, and I really enjoyed it, which is why I'm giving it a 10 out of 10. Just a phenomenal movie through and through about the kind of brilliant mind, really, of Robert J. Oppenheimer, and of course, kind of what ended up happening with him, and just the fact that he definitely regretted what he had done even though he was told to do it, and people believed that obviously he was, because it made him in the limelight, that he would have done things just the same as he did before. But he really did, kind of go against what he was doing the entire time he was doing it, which is, I guess, just because it was all based on theory, and he was afraid of what the repercussions would be from it. And I think that unfortunately, at the end of the movie, we really saw like the fact that he um, really had like opened up a new can of worms for the world by creating this bomb, which is unfortunate. And they, of course, weren't going to give him the clearance again to work on anything else, just based on some of his answers in the small hearing they had with him. Now, that was kind of a setup in order to not give him clearance again, which is what Strauss wanted. But uh, it was just kind of unfortunate that he wasn't going to be overseeing the project anymore, and who knew, like, who was going to be taking over, right? So 10 out of 10 for this movie. I think I already said that, but yeah. Uh, so we'll go over the cast list. So Cillian Murphy, who played Robert J. Oppenheimer, Emily Blunt, who played Kitty Oppenheimer, Matt Damon, who played Leslie Groves, Robert Downey Jr., who played Lewis Strauss, uh, Jason Clarke, who played Roger Robb, Tom Conti, who played Albert Einstein, Matthew, Matthew Schweighofer, who played Werner Heisenberg, Josh Hartnett, who played Ernest Lawrence, Dylan Arnold, who played Frank Oppenheimer, who was his brother, Florence Pugh, who played Jean Tatlock, who was like his first love interest in the movie, I guess. Jennifer Hall, who played Hakan Chevalier, who was one of his neighbors, who was like part of this communist party in the States. And so they believed, of course, that they were like working with the Russians, right? And that was a big thing with Oppenheimer even getting his clearance in the beginning of the movie. So that was kind of crazy. Casey Affleck, who played Boris Pash, who was military man, but he was higher up. I can't remember his exact rank, but he had done some pretty shady things, I guess, from the sounds of it, based on what Leslie had said. So, yeah, the fact that Oppenheimer even gave him any information at all about what he thought could potentially be happening inside of uh, the little town that they had created. What was it? Los Atmos? I can't remember the exact name, but forgive me for that. And then Benny Sadfi as Edward Teller. So we'll go back over the list of my notes here. Where do they start? So we kind of go over like the whole fission and fusion part of it. I guess that was kind of like the argument as to what kind of bomb was going to be created. Like was it going to be a fission bomb or a fusion bomb sort of thing. So um, Oppenheimer does talk about his visions that he had when he was overseas. I think in England. Um, and then so yeah, he talks about his visions, and they slowly get worse throughout the movie, like the visions that he's having. And I don't know if anybody ever really like studied his mind as to why he was having these sorts of visions, but I think he was kind of like the man who like regretted some of the stuff that he studied, and he actually almost poisoned his one teacher or whatever in his very early days, but he was able to go back and uh, luckily throw out the apple that had the poison in it, and nobody got hurt. But yeah, I'm not really sure why he did that, but I'm sure he had his reasons for it. I think he was just a very experimental man and wanted to see potentially what could happen, no matter what no matter how far he had to go, right, he wanted to see the outcome of every single experiment that he was doing, no matter how small or how big. He was a completionist, I guess you could say. So he does go to Germany to study because I guess he's kind of like hit a wall in his studies at this point and wants to obviously further it. So he seeks out Heisenberg when he's in Germany, and then what was it after that? He begins to teach. So when he goes back to the States, he starts teaching about quantum mechanics and how like light is made up of waves and particles, or particles and waves according to quantum mechanics. So that's what he's teaching, and it's kind of interesting to find out that it's not supposed to be both, but somehow it is, and that's how it coexists. So it's a very interesting thing. Because yeah, when you think about like the light from the bomb hits first, and then the sound comes, so it's a very weird mixture, I guess. Don't quote me on anything that I'm saying because I don't know the whole science behind obviously the atomic bomb. But I thought he was more involved in the making of the hydrogen bomb. Now I guess he was, but he was opposed to it because he believed that the same thing was going to happen, obviously, that they did with the atomic bomb, right? Where there was going to be like a huge arms race for it with the Russians. And obviously, at that point in time, everybody would be trying, if the Russians started, then obviously other countries would be trying to start the race too, right? Which they didn't want it in the hands of Germany because they knew the power that Germany could hold if they had a weapon like that. Now, I'm pretty sure Germany had its weapons of mass destruction. Now, I'm not sure whether there was anything close to like an atom bomb or anything, but yeah, I do know that obviously eventually the Germans surrendered before, this bomb even had to be created or tested. But the Japanese weren't giving up, I guess, and this was after Pearl Harbor, obviously, so the U.S. wanted to retaliate, so they picked the targets of uh, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? And eventually the two bombs go off after the test is successful, and yeah, but we'll touch on that a little bit more, obviously, before I get way too ahead of myself. But yeah, the tests were successful, and the bombs do get shipped off, and yeah, the outcome is the outcome. We all know what happened there. So yeah, I guess Oppenheimer was being investigated for his left-wing political standing. All of these like small Communist Party meetings that he was a part of, even though he didn't really agree with the party itself or never actually really joined. It's because he was associated with people who were in it that they were investigating him. Um, yeah, because his name came up with those party meetings. So, and then of course the race to build the bomb begins because of the Russians, I guess, being a step ahead, and they obviously didn't want it in the hands of the Germans. So they were hoping that they could have something built to end World War II with the Germans, right? But that didn't end up happening, and then we all know what happens with Japan, right? So Oppenheimer had a small town built for the people, to bring in the people he needed to help, obviously, like all of the scientists. And of course, then it gets a little out of hand, and the security is kind of, I guess, lacking in the town. And one of the guys that he was working with slips through and is actually a Russian spy. So he's able to give the Russians information on what they're building. So then, of course, it does become sort of a little, I guess, arms race too. So hydrogen is suggested to be used in this bomb instead of uranium or plutonium. Now, that's kind of crazy because the atom bomb was the first thing created, right? But then the hydrogen bomb product started right afterwards. So it's kind of crazy to think. So yeah, again, the race with the Russians begins, and then they do like their small field testing just to kind of get like a blast radius of what a actual bomb would do. Um, Now, I thought this was the first hydrogen bomb test, but I guess this would have been the first atom bomb test was successful. Um, so then, of course, the bomb is dropped on Hiroshima, and then I don't know whether it was the same day or I think it was separate days, right? That they were, or was it the same day that they were dropped on both Hiroshima and Nagasaki? I'll have to look that up, but at least the bomb on Hiroshima is dropped, and that's what they radioed through. And of course, Leslie congratulates Oppenheimer on what he's done, and gives him as much information as he can anyway after that point, because he's basically done with Oppenheimer and all the scientists. Like, they've done their part, they've done their job. Now they can move on to the next phase, right? And of course, they do bring in Oppenheimer for the hydrogen bomb project, but he fights it tooth and nail, because I think now he's kind of seen what he's done and what destruction he can cause, and he doesn't necessarily like the outcome of what he was a part of. So, yeah, that's kind of like his moral compass kicking in, going, oh, well, I did this, but at what cost have I done this? Like, sure, it might have ended the war, but I also just killed a whole bunch of innocent people with my creation, and that's not really what I was trying to do. But that's the job they brought me in for, so that's what I was kind of forced to do, in a sense, I guess, is what his thinking was. So then we find out that Strauss betrays Oppenheimer and tries to get him kicked out, because Strauss believes that Oppenheimer had turned all the scientists against him right from the beginning, starting with Albert Einstein, who I guess Strauss was really good friends with. And then after they had that conversation, I guess Einstein wouldn't even look him in the eye or talk to him anymore. But it was because at that point, Einstein had been kind of talking with Oppenheimer about what they were doing, and Einstein had just said, one day you're going to get a medal for what you've done, and everybody will kind of, pat you on the, give you a pat on the back and say all hard feelings out of the way now, so on and so forth. But they're not doing it for you; they're doing it for them, because they want all the glory too, right? Sort of thing. Even though it was Oppenheimer's mind that really pushed this project forward, obviously, right? Like, he was definitely the brains behind it all. Um, so they come to this little conclusion in this room that they're in. Basically, it's like a small meeting of people who already have the outcome set for Oppenheimer, but he's still going to try to clear his name as much as he can. And of course, Dr. Hill comes in and goes against Strauss, which is not what Strauss thought was going to happen. He thought everybody was just going to be on his side. But eventually, they come to the conclusion that, of course, Oppenheimer isn't a threat to the U.S. Like, he's obviously a U.S. citizen, loyal to the U.S., but just based on some of the answers he's given about the hydrogen bomb project that they're currently working on, they're not going to bring him back in or give him clearance again, because they know that he'll just fight it tooth and nail, I guess, was kind of like their outcome of what is going to happen, right? And they obviously want the project to move forward, and yeah, it's just, if he's there, it's going to be a fight tooth and nail to try to get this project off the ground, I guess. So they don't want him there anymore. And I think this was in the 1950s when he lost his clearance, if I remember reading that correctly. But it was, so I think Strauss gets kicked out too. Like, he's no longer going to be part of anything big either, just based on the fact that Hill came in and told them that, all of the stuff about the shady stuff that Strauss had done to Oppenheimer as well. And so it was kind of funny, because one of the younger ones that voted against Strauss to come back in was John F. Kennedy. So I'm sure that John F. Kennedy was young, very young at that point, because when did John F. Kennedy get assassinated? I can't remember the exact year, but anyway, he wasn't very old when he got assassinated either. So yeah, I guess you could say that John F. Kennedy kind of went, had his own take on things too, right? Like, he didn't really like the way that Hill was describing what Strauss had done to Oppenheimer, so he took Oppenheimer's side on it. And obviously, because I think that Oppenheimer was kind of like the reason the war ended, right? So I think that Kennedy was going to take that side no matter what. um, but yeah, Strauss did believe that Oppenheimer turned all the scientists against him, but that wasn't the conversation that him and Einstein had. And at the very end of the conversation, Oppenheimer turns to Einstein and says, um, remember when we talked about, the potential of this bomb like destroying the world? And Einstein says yes, and he goes, well, I think we've done that, because now everybody is going to be creating a some sort of nuclear weapon, and we haven't destroyed the world in the way that we thought we were going to originally, which was what they thought could happen was the bomb goes off and it takes to the air particles and just kind of keeps going, which was a crazy thing to think about, but I mean, it was all based on theory, right? So anything is possible when you're basing your findings on theory. So again, even when they were doing like the first testing and the dropping of the bomb to prove that it could work, Oppenheimer says, the possibility of that still isn't exactly zero. And Leslie says to him, well, I would like it to be zero, but he goes, well, what can you really get based on the theory, right? So yeah, again, it was all kind of theoretical up until the point where they finally were able to test it and it worked. And it is kind of sad to see Oppenheimer's downfall. Of course, he ends up losing. Jean ends up actually taking her own life, and he does say that he's friends with a lot of the people that were in the so-called Communist Party, including his wife, who was a member at the time that they ended up meeting and getting together and married. But she hasn't been a part of it for, well, she kind of like roundabout says 16 years, and then she says 17, and then she says 18. So she's kind of throwing this whole like meeting off of the track, right, is what she's trying to do. But yeah, a really enjoyable movie, a really really deep dive into Oppenheimer's life. Now, I'm not really sure how much of this is true, but there are photos of him and Einstein together. So they obviously knew one another a little bit, I would say, just from that. So yeah, it is very interesting, because a lot of them, like Oppenheimer was young. I think in his story it started out in like the 1920s, basically, was when we first ended the timeline, and then it goes right into like the 1940s into the war, right? And then, the hydrogen bomb after that, and then him getting kicked out in the 1950s. 1954, if I'm not mistaken, was when all of this stuff went down, where he wasn't allowed clearance back into any new missions or any new creations or any new what's the word, like any new projects, I guess, is what I'm trying to say here. So yeah, kind of an interesting life that he led. He was always open-minded to everything. He even kind of put like politics in the classroom on the board, and of course a lot of the other guys said, leave that out of here. What you do in your own life shouldn't be brought in, because then you're not going to be able to be on this project, because they're going to think you're one of them, right? Even though he wasn't ever a card-carrying member of the Communist Party in the States. Now, I guess his wife tried to explain that, there was some sort of difference, obviously, between like the Russian Communist Party and the Communist Party in the States, but then she stopped believing that, and she started to see that it was kind of like all connected and just widespread across the whole world. And so she hasn't been a member since that belief system kind of fell into her lap, I guess. It kind of seems crazy that she would be part of it, but I guess maybe she kind of disassociated from it after Oppenheimer got onto this project, because if she was still part of the party, it would be very hard for him to still get any clearance either, right? So yeah, I think she may be disassociated with it for that reason. But it was not an easy life for her either, because Oppenheimer kind of did whatever he wanted to do, and he ends up going to see the other girl again, right? And cheats on her. So, but she kind of like she was there in his corner the entire time, telling him to like pick himself back up, and you can't do the sin and then make us feel sorry for you, sort of thing. So that was kind of crazy. And there was a really strong quote at the beginning of the movie, um, and he says it a couple times, like "I am the bringer of death now, the ender of worlds," sort of thing. Don't quote me on. I don't know if that's the exact quote, but there was a quote at the end that or at the beginning of the movie that I should have really wrote down. That kind of sticks with you, I guess. If I could remember it exactly, that might have been actually what it was. It was something about bringing fire to the world, and then there was something underneath it. But yeah. Anyway, I guess I'm kind of rambling on here now, so I will see you guys in the next video. 10 out of 10 for this movie. Bye bye for now.